Owner's Manual for Life. You know, the Bible says that we ought to be truthful and that we ought to be fair. You don't have to be truthful. You don't have to be fair. But the Bible's, the Owner's Manual for Life says you should do that. When I was 14 years old, I worked part-time at a nursery in Spokane, Washington, the P&H nursery. Not the kind where there are babies and children, the kind that grow plants and trees. And my job was to weed the plants. I made the plants and the trees look nice by pulling out the weeds that were growing in the pots. But sometimes when things got busy, they'd ask me to help wait on customers and sell trees and shrubs. Every year, the P&H nursery had a 1-cent sale in the fall. And it was quite a sale. You buy a tree, I think it was just fruit trees. You buy a fruit tree, you get the second one for a penny. Now, I will tell you, I don't know if this is commonly done in the industry, but I know that the night before we had the weekend of the 1-cent sale, we would go through the entire inventory at the nursery and raise all the prices dramatically. Now, we didn't double the prices, so the customers are still getting a good deal, but the $7.99 trees became $11.99 trees and that sort of thing. But this particular year, the 1-cent sale was very successful. And before we know it, like the second day of the weekend, we had run out of peach trees. So I go back to the office and talk to the boss and say, we're out of peach trees. What do we do? And the manager, the owner and then the manager said, well, I'll tell you what, we've got a bunch of plum trees in the back. Let's bring the plum trees up and put them in the peach tree spot. You know, these are young trees before they're old enough to bear fruit, and not many people can tell by looking at the leaves the difference between a plum tree and a peach tree. So they brought the plum trees up from the back and they put them in the peach tree spot. And I was expected to, knowing full well that these were not peach trees, I was expected to sell these plum trees to the customers. Well, I'll be honest with you, I'm 14 years old and a new Christian. I had just recently surrendered my life to God, and you know, these guys were older, and some of you will remember what it's like as a teenager. A lot of times you're not very sure of yourself and know what to do, and so I acquiesced. I went along with this. We moved the plum trees up, but before I sold one tree, I began to feel my conscience started bothering me, and this didn't seem right, and it didn't seem like it was a nice thing to do to cheat these people. I mean, they wouldn't know for years until after they'd planted these trees that they had bought plum trees instead of peach trees. But my conscience was bothering me. I remember the conversation in the office when they decided to bring the plum trees up and put them in the peach tree spot, and the manager says, "They're fuzzless peaches." And it was a big joke, and everybody laughed heartily. Well, after a half an hour, I went back into the office and said, I don't think we should be selling those fuzzless peaches, those plum trees, to the customers. And I'm not going to do it. And so then this really startled the owner and the manager. I mean, in life, people, especially 14-year-old kids, do not usually stand up for principle. And I got to be honest with you, this was extremely hard for me. I just, you know, I was unsure. I didn't march in there and put my foot down and said, I will not do this. This is wrong. No, man, I was scared. I mean, adults are intimidating when you're only 14 years old, and to call them wrong and to imply that they're cheating was really tough for me. And of course I was willing to lose my job over it. So so I remember Gary was the name of the manager, and Gary takes me, puts his arm around me. We go outside the office and we're walking around the nursery, and he's telling me, Doug, I'm a Christian too, and I know that this might seem wrong to you, but, and believe it or not, and he was a very, he was a guy had charisma, and he was persuasive, and he did his best to convince me that this was not wrong, that this was, we were just doing business, and they probably want plum trees anyway. Aren't plums better than peaches? I'm laughing about it now, but you know, it is serious. And I said no, I'm not going to do it. I went back to the office and told the manager, and I said, I'm not going to sell these fuzzless peaches, and I think I'm going to report you to the Better Business Bureau also. And at that, man, the owner, he was an Italian guy. His name was, well, anyway, he was, his face got red, and he said I was this little snotty-nosed kid, and he was swearing at me, and that really made him mad. So I lost my job that day at the nursery. But don't you see, I gained a lot more that day. You know, the owner's manual for life says be honest and don't cheat people. And that day, I took the book at face value, and I decided not to cheat people, and I decided to be honest that day. And I want to say that ever since then, when situations have come up in my life, similar situations, I thank God that I had the wisdom and the sense to follow the owner's manual of life. Why? I don't know why. Listen, I'm just a guy, okay? I'm just a guy who surrendered to God 40 years ago and have decided to live the way the book said to. And I got to tell you, I got a good life. And I look around me, I see most people don't have a good life. I attribute it to the words in this book. Whether they be inspired by God, which I believe they are, or whether they are only 5,000 years of distilled wisdom, these books, these words have served me well. You know, when I was 14, if I had decided to sell those fuzzless peaches that day, don't you see that a piece of me would have been lost that day? Don't you see that I would have conformed to a lower level of humanity at that point? Don't you see that I would have lost a little bit of my goodness, the goodness that God intended us to have originally? And don't you think that subsequently, when it came time to do my taxes, and I had an opportunity to lie about how much charitable giving I had given that year, or how much income I'd have, or the extent of my insurance losses, don't you think that it would have been easier to lie the second time and the third time? And can you see how the accumulative effect of not living like the owner's manual says we should live can result in a life that is bereft of self-respect, that is guilty and is depressed, and becomes part of the cesspool of the mind when we live contrary to the purposes of God. Well, Maybe you can't, but it rings true, and I believe it.